We all know Lamar Odom as a glittering star of the Los Angeles courts, a man who seemingly had it all. But to understand the spectacular collapse of this towering figure, we have to travel far away from the bright lights of Hollywood. We have to go back to the gritty, unforgiving streets of South Jamaica, Queens, where Lamar Odom first learned to survive. His early years were anything but a fairy tale of privilege. His father was largely absent, battling severe personal demons and a dependence on illicit substances, leaving a young Lamar to navigate a dangerous world almost entirely on his own. Basketball became his absolute sanctuary, the only place where the chaos of the streets could not reach him. But those streets were relentless. According to the New York Police Department archives from that specific era, the crime rate in his native neighborhood had reached historic, terrifying maximums. Looking at those grim statistics, one has to wonder how anyone could escape that environment unscathed. For Lamar Odom, the answer was his mother, Kathy. She was his absolute rock and the center of his universe. But tragedy struck with a brutal suddenness. In his own published memoirs, Lamar Odom painfully documented that his mother passed away from a severe illness in 1991, leaving him completely shattered at just 12 years old. In the medical records and personal accounts of that time, it was noted that her departure was rapid and utterly devastating for the family. And right here arises the main question: how does a child process such a catastrophic loss while carrying the immense weight of generational trauma? Lamar Odom channeled all that unimaginable grief into the game of basketball. He practically lived on the local courts, using his sheer height and undeniable talent to build an invisible wall around his broken heart. Scouts from all over the country started swarming, predicting multimillion-dollar contracts and a life of unimaginable luxury for the prodigy. But just as the path to greatness seemed clear, in the spring of 1997, a highly confidential document surfaced that threatened to destroy his entire career before it even truly began. Lamar Odom was not just good at basketball, he was a once-in-a-generation spectacle. On the hardwood, he moved with a grace that defied his massive frame, drawing crowds who whispered that they were watching the next great American legend. However, behind the dazzling passes and effortless scoring, a deeply concerning pattern was already taking shape. If you look at the official rankings published by Parade magazine in 1997, Lamar Odom was proudly listed as the #1 high school player in the entire United States. That title alone usually guarantees a smooth ride to a top-tier college and endless corporate endorsements. Yet, the reality behind the scenes was incredibly chaotic. Lamar bounced between 3 different high schools in a remarkably short period. In the official reports of the High School Athletic League, his sudden transfer from the prestigious Redemption Academy in New York was thoroughly documented, explicitly citing severe issues with academic performance and mounting disciplinary infractions. In those administrative files, it was noted that keeping him eligible to play was becoming an increasingly impossible task for his coaches. Why was a player with such astronomical potential constantly sabotaging his own academic standing? The answer lies in the immense pressure placed on a teenager who was entirely unequipped to handle the heavy expectations of the adults surrounding him. He was a superstar on the court, but off the court, he was a lost young man crying out for genuine guidance. Despite the constant academic turbulence, major universities were still desperate to recruit him, more than willing to look the other way for a chance at a national championship. But the entire recruiting circus came to a screeching halt when a highly suspicious financial transaction was quietly processed. The real scandal erupted when the accounting department at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas suddenly registered a bank transfer for exactly $5,600. The glitz and glamour of Las Vegas seemed like the absolute perfect backdrop for Lamar Odom to launch his collegiate career. The University of Nevada, Las Vegas was incredibly eager to feature him as the spectacular centerpiece of their basketball program. But the immense excitement quickly dissolved into a massive controversy that sent shockwaves through the entire collegiate sports world. A major journalistic investigation blew the lid off a quiet arrangement that violated every strict rule in the amateur sports playbook. Sports Illustrated published a highly resonant feature detailing an illicit financial operation, and within that sweeping report, the precise sum of $5,600 was explicitly linked to Lamar Odom. According to the published findings, this money was funneled to him by a prominent university booster. The revelation was an absolute bombshell for the media. In the official investigative files from the Athletic Commission, it was noted that these under-the-table payments were a direct violation of strictly enforced athletic guidelines. And we must ask ourselves the difficult question: who was really manipulating the strings of this vulnerable young athlete? Was Lamar Odom fully aware of the immense professional risk he was taking, or was he just a naive pawn in a very expensive game orchestrated by greedy adults? The consequences were swift, public, and merciless. His university scholarship was immediately revoked, and his collegiate eligibility was thrown into serious doubt. But the dark clouds in Las Vegas did not end with financial improprieties. According to the archival arrest records of the Las Vegas Police Department, Lamar Odom was officially cited for an administrative offense in the summer of 1997. Between the scandalous magazine article and the police citation, his reputation was in absolute tatters before he ever played a single college game. It seemed like the doors to the professional leagues were permanently slammed shut. Yet, when all hope seemed entirely lost, in the autumn of 1998, one desperate coach in Rhode Island decided to risk his own professional reputation on the fallen star. After the catastrophic fallout in Nevada, Lamar Odom was widely considered a sports pariah. No major university wanted to associate with a young prospect carrying that much scandalous baggage and intense media scrutiny. But Jim Herrick, the head coach at the University of Rhode Island, saw an opportunity that was simply too massive to ignore. He offered Lamar a lifeline, a final, high-stakes chance to prove that his immense talent could overshadow his troubled past. And Lamar seized that opportunity with an absolute vengeance. For one spectacular season, he turned a relatively modest basketball program into a national powerhouse, reminding every single scout why he was once considered the top high school player in the entire country. In the official statistical records of the NCAA for the 1998 to 1999 season, it is clearly documented that Lamar Odom averaged exactly 17.6 points per game, while completely dominating the rebounding boards. In the athletic department reports from that year, observers noted that his unique combination of towering size and elegant playmaking ability was virtually unmatched at the collegiate level. But looking closely at these staggering numbers, a crucial question emerges. Was this brilliant performance a sign of true personal growth, or merely a temporary pause in a much larger, self-destructive cycle? The answer to that question would soon be tested by the ultimate temptation. His dominant season culminated in a dramatic victory at the Atlantic 10 Conference Tournament, perfectly setting the stage for his entry into the professional ranks. The executives in the National Basketball Association could no longer ignore his undeniable skill, despite the glaring red flags hiding in his background. In the heavily guarded protocols of the 1999 professional draft, it is permanently recorded that the Los Angeles Clippers selected Lamar Odom and secured his talents with a contract valued at approximately $8.8 million over 3 years. Just think about that life-altering sum of money. A young man who had grown up surrounded by the deepest struggles of South Jamaica, Queens, was suddenly handed the literal keys to the kingdom. However, acquiring those millions meant relocating to a city famous for devouring young, wealthy celebrities. Having received his first taste of unimaginable wealth, the 19-year-old player found himself in the absolute epicenter of Los Angeles temptations, where in 2001, a deeply concerning incident would occur that confirmed everyone's worst fears. Arriving in Los Angeles with millions of dollars sitting in the bank, Lamar Odom was expected to be the ultimate savior for a perpetually struggling Clippers franchise. During his rookie campaign, he delivered breathtaking performances that fully justified every single penny of his massive rookie contract. He was running the floor, distributing the ball, and scoring with a mesmerizing fluidity that left veteran defenders completely helpless. Yet, the glittering facade of his professional success was masking a deeply troubling reality away from the hardwood. The immense pressures of sudden fame, combined with the lingering ghosts of his tragic past, were quietly pulling him back into incredibly dangerous habits. The whispers among sports journalists grew louder, hinting that Lamar was battling profound personal struggles that were beginning to severely impact his professional reliability. Those quiet, behind-the-scenes rumors officially became a glaring public scandal in the spring. In the official press releases issued by the National Basketball Association in March of 2001, it is formally documented that Lamar Odom was handed a strict 5-game suspension for violating the league's highly regulated anti-substance policy. In the disciplinary filings, league officials noted that his compliance with standard testing protocols had completely broken down. And this brings us to a terrifying realization. How could a franchise cornerstone risk an $8 million empire for fleeting, destructive escapes? But the situation was about to deteriorate even further. The initial intervention did not serve as the wake-up call management had desperately hoped for. In November of 2001, the league office published another damning document detailing a second, much more severe suspension, a disciplinary action that cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost salary. According to the internal memos leaked to the local press, the Clippers management was growing incredibly frustrated with their star players' unpredictable and highly erratic behavior. Tired of the endless fines and the constant media circus surrounding his personal choices, the front office finally decided to cut their losses with their most talented asset. They needed him gone, and in the summer of 2003, a highly lucrative contract appeared on the table from a man who ruled his organization with an absolute iron fist. After the chaotic and highly publicized final days in Los Angeles, Lamar Odom desperately needed a strictly structured environment to salvage his rapidly wavering reputation. That desperately needed structure arrived in the intimidating form of Pat Riley, the legendary executive of the Miami Heat, a man famously known for his absolute, uncompromising discipline. Riley saw the raw, untapped brilliance hiding inside Lamar and decided to make a massive financial gamble on his future. According to the official financial ledgers of the Basketball League, the contract signed with Miami in the autumn of 2003 was valued at a staggering $65 million, spanning over 6 years. By looking at these publicly filed financial records, one must immediately question the core logic. Why would an executive as ruthless and calculating as Pat Riley invest $65 million into a player who had just been suspended twice for severe disciplinary infractions? The answer was total control. Riley genuinely believed he could break Lamar Odom's bad habits through sheer exhausting physical conditioning and unyielding accountability. In the published transcripts of his media press conferences, Pat Riley openly declared his notoriously strict physical requirements forcefully demanding that every single player maintain a body fat ratio of no more than 8%. In the training camp reports filed by veteran sports writers that season, it was repeatedly noted that Lamar was pushed to the absolute brink of his physical and mental endurance just to meet those draconian standards. He was forced to abandon his erratic lifestyle and conform to a relentless, militaristic daily routine. And surprisingly, the intense, suffocating pressure actually worked. Lamar played brilliantly, leading a young, vibrant Miami squad deep into the postseason and completely restoring his image as a highly dependable elite forward. He finally seemed genuinely happy, personally settled, and completely focused on building a lasting legacy in South Florida. But this sun-drenched tranquility would not last long, because in July of 2004, a sudden phone call informed him of a blockbuster transaction that completely shocked the entire basketball world. The hard-earned tranquility of the Florida coast was violently shattered by a massive business decision that completely altered the landscape of professional basketball. Lamar Odom was abruptly informed that he was packing his bags and heading right back into the relentless, unforgiving media storm of Los Angeles. But this was not just any standard roster move. In the officially filed transfer documents of the National Basketball Association, dated July 14, 2004, it is permanently recorded that Lamar, along with two other players, was traded directly for the legendary Shaquille O'Neal. Just imagine the sheer, suffocating weight of that specific transaction. According to the leading articles published by major Los Angeles sports publications during that exact week, the heavy expectations placed on the new forward were valued in the tens of millions of dollars. The journalists explicitly wrote that he was brought in to fill the shoes of an absolute giant. And this immediately raises a critical investigative question. Was the front office intentionally setting him up for an impossible task? Replacing the most dominant physical force in the entire league is a burden that would break almost anyone, let alone a player who was just beginning to find his mental footing. Lamar was thrust directly into the blinding spotlight of the Staples Center, tasked with carrying a franchise that was heavily fracturing from the inside out. He struggled immensely to adapt to a locker room completely consumed by massive egos and incredibly high financial stakes. But while the intense scrutiny of the sports media and the frustrated fans felt unbearable, the ultimate test of his spirit was not going to happen on the polished hardwood. The real catastrophe was quietly waiting for him far away from the television cameras in the sterile, terrifying halls of a pediatric ward in the summer of 2006. Stepping onto the court wearing the iconic purple and gold uniform meant stepping directly into the intense, highly guarded territory of Kobe Bryant. The daily dynamic between these two stars was incredibly complicated and heavily scrutinized by every single sports pundit in the country. Kobe was notoriously ruthless, demanding absolute perfection and intense aggression from everyone around him. Lamar, on the other hand, was naturally unselfish, a player who always preferred to keep his teammates happy rather than take the final decisive shot. This profound difference in their psychological mentalities quickly became a glaring issue. If we closely examine the official transcripts of the post-game press conferences throughout 2005, we find repeated, heavily publicized instances where Bryant openly called out his new teammate, demanding that Lamar play with far more anger. According to the detailed statistical reports compiled by the ESPN Analytical Bureau during that exact period, Lamar's offensive production fluctuated wildly from night to night. In the official game logs, it was glaringly clear that his on-court confidence was a deeply fragile thing. And looking at these public documents, one has to wonder, was the crushing psychological pressure of Los Angeles actually destroying the immense potential that Miami had just carefully rebuilt? The locker room tension was incredibly thick, and the local newspapers were constantly publishing rumors, questioning whether this high-priced pairing could ever truly work. Slowly, however, they began to forge a very unique brotherly bond, balancing out each other's extreme personalities behind closed doors. The chemistry was finally starting to materialize on the court, and the team was looking toward a highly promising future. But just as the professional skies were finally beginning to clear, an absolutely devastating personal blow struck in June of 2006, instantly rendering the game of basketball completely meaningless. No amount of money, fame, or athletic success can ever prepare a young parent for the absolute worst nightmare imaginable. Lamar Odom was desperately trying to build a stable, loving foundation for his growing family. But the summer of 2006 brought a terrifying wave of grief that completely fractured his reality. His precious 6-month-old son, Jaden, suddenly stopped breathing while resting quietly in his crib. In the deeply tragic medical conclusions published later, with the reluctant consent of the family, the exact cause of this unimaginable heartbreak was officially recorded as sudden infant respiratory syndrome. To lose a child is a sorrow that cannot be articulated, but the universe was not finished testing his endurance. Shortly after burying his infant son, Lamar also lost his beloved aunt, the very woman who had stepped in to raise him after his mother passed away. He was suddenly completely stripped of his emotional anchors. The public saw a very wealthy athlete continuing to play a game, but the private reality was vastly different. In his published autobiography released many years later, Lamar explicitly confessed that the heavy burden of these compounding tragedies pushed him directly toward a very dark path. According to his own painfully honest memoirs, it was precisely during this incredibly dark period that he first turned to highly dangerous, illicit substances merely to numb the overwhelming psychological agony. The official narrative fed to the press was that he was simply mourning in private. But right here lies the terrifying truth. A multi-million-dollar athletic empire was being managed by a man who was actively breaking apart from the inside. Many seasoned sports journalists quietly predicted that his professional career would soon fade away under the weight of such profound grief. However, the entire trajectory of his life shifted once again when, in February of 2008, a highly confidential fax arrived at the Lakers' front office, bringing an unexpected transaction that would change the league forever. The devastating personal losses of 2006 left Lamar Odom practically a ghost on the basketball court, carrying an emotional weight that no amount of physical conditioning could ever alleviate. The Los Angeles Lakers were struggling immensely to find their rhythm, and the intense media scrutiny was relentlessly focused on Lamar's wildly inconsistent performances. But the entire trajectory of his professional life shifted dramatically in February of 2008. In the highly confidential transaction documents filed with the league office that exact month, a monumental trade was officially registered: the arrival of the brilliant Spanish forward, Pau Gasol. This singular front office decision fundamentally altered the entire psychological dynamic of the roster. According to the detailed statistical reports published by major sports analytical bureaus shortly after the trade was finalized, the offensive efficiency of the Lakers skyrocketed almost immediately. Gasol's arrival was an absolute blessing for a mentally exhausted Lamar. It completely removed the suffocating daily pressure of being the undisputed second scoring option behind an incredibly demanding Kobe Bryant. Instead, Lamar smoothly transitioned into a highly versatile, playmaking forward role that perfectly suited his unique, unselfish skill set. He was no longer forced to be the aggressive enforcer. He could finally be the strategic facilitator. The chemistry within the locker room transformed from incredibly tense to highly synchronized. The team began marching through the Western Conference with absolute dominance, looking completely unstoppable on their quest for a title. But as they confidently advanced toward the Ultimate Championship Series in June, the players were completely unaware that they were walking directly into a historic trap set by their absolute fiercest rivals, leading to a brutal collapse that nobody in Los Angeles could have predicted. The highly anticipated championship series of 2008 was supposed to be the ultimate crowning achievement for Lamar Odom and his newly revitalized squad. They were facing the Boston Celtics, a legendary rivalry that always guaranteed massive television ratings and extreme physical intensity. However, the glittering Hollywood dream of hoisting the Golden Trophy quickly transformed into an absolute agonizing nightmare. The Celtics were incredibly aggressive, relentlessly bullying the Lakers across the hardwood and exposing every single mental vulnerability. The crushing climax of this brutal series occurred during the infamous sixth game. If you look at the official scorer's protocol from that devastating night in Boston, it is permanently recorded that the Lakers suffered an utterly humiliating defeat with a staggering point differential of exactly 39 points. It was not just a loss, it was a total public dismantling broadcast on national television. In the incredibly somber articles published by the Los Angeles Times the following morning, veteran reporters vividly described a dead, haunting silence filling the visitors' locker room. The press mercilessly attacked the team's glaring lack of mental toughness, and once again, Lamar found himself heavily criticized for seemingly disappearing when the stakes were at their absolute highest. The severe psychological blow of losing so spectacularly on the biggest stage imaginable could have easily fractured a weaker team forever. The entire summer was spent agonizing over that 39-point embarrassment, replaying the devastating errors. But this profound sporting humiliation actually served a very specific, hidden purpose. Instead of breaking their collective spirit, that agonizing defeat became the burning catalyst that would transform the roster into a relentless, vindictive machine by the summer of 2009. Returning to the training camp in the fall of 2008, Lamar Odom and his teammates shared a cold, unspoken agreement. Absolutely nothing short of total victory would be acceptable this time around. The haunting, bitter memories of the Boston humiliation pushed them to an entirely new level of focus and aggression. Throughout the grueling regular season, Lamar fully embraced his supporting role, willingly sacrificing his own personal statistics for the greater good of the roster. Their absolute dominance carried them straight back to the finals, this time facing the Orlando Magic. And this time, there would be no heartbreaking collapse. In the historical archives of the Basketball League, it is permanently recorded that on June 14, 2009, the Los Angeles Lakers successfully secured their 15th championship title. The final buzzer triggered an incredible outpouring of raw, unfiltered emotion that went far beyond the standard boundaries of professional sports. On the widely broadcast video recordings of the post-game press conference, a visibly overwhelmed Lamar Odom sat before the blinding flashes of the cameras, tears streaming down his face. According to his emotional statements recorded that night, he publicly dedicated this monumental triumph to the family members he had tragically lost, finally finding a moment of pure professional joy amidst years of profound personal sorrow. He had finally reached the absolute pinnacle of his sport, proving every single loud critic entirely wrong. But just as he finally secured his ultimate professional validation, his private life was about to take a wild, incredibly public turn. Celebrating his hard-earned championship ring, he attended a glamorous Hollywood party, completely unaware that he was about to lock eyes with a woman who would become his bride in exactly 30 days. The euphoric high of securing a championship ring in the summer of 2009 was immediately followed by a personal decision that completely derailed his carefully reconstructed public image. Lamar Odom was suddenly no longer just a vital component of a championship basketball roster. He willingly walked right into the blinding center of the ultimate Hollywood media machine. The romance began with astonishing, almost terrifying speed. In the official marriage registry of Los Angeles County, the date of his wedding is permanently recorded as September 27, 2009. And looking at that exact date, a massive red flag immediately appears. Why rush into a legally binding union just 30 days after initially meeting someone? Was it genuine, overwhelming affection? Or was a highly vulnerable athlete being quickly absorbed into a carefully orchestrated corporate empire? According to the published financial disclosures of major entertainment publications, People magazine officially purchased the exclusive rights to the wedding photography for exactly $300,000. In the editorial reports of that exact week, journalists explicitly noted that the event felt far more like a meticulously produced television pilot than a private romantic ceremony. And we have to ask, who was truly benefiting from this highly lucrative spectacle? He was a man who had always sought a traditional family structure to replace the devastating losses of his past. But he unknowingly traded his locker room sanctuary for a household filled with heavy camera equipment and relentless producers. The paparazzi cameras now followed his every single move, and as he prepared to step back onto the hardwood for the upcoming season, he was carrying a bizarre new identity. He was now a central character in a reality television phenomenon, and heading into 2010, this intense overexposure would test his mental endurance more than any defensive scheme ever could. Defending a professional title is widely considered the most exhausting psychological challenge in sports, but Lamar Odom had to do it while completely surrounded by reality television crews. The 2009 to 2010 season was an absolute pressure cooker, culminating in a vicious, highly physical rematch against the Boston Celtics. The stakes were incredibly high, and the entire series came down to a single, deciding game. In the official statistical archives of the 2010 finals, it is permanently documented that the Lakers secured the championship in a brutal Game 7, where Lamar provided critical defensive stops in the final agonizing minutes. How could a player heavily distracted by Hollywood obligations maintain such incredible focus on the defensive glass under maximum pressure? The public narrative suggested he was completely losing his athletic edge, but the hard statistics proved he was still an absolutely essential piece of the championship puzzle. However, the victory parade was barely finished before the cameras intensified their focus. According to the official broadcast logs and viewership data published by the Entertainment Television Network, the premiere episode of his personal spin-off show in the spring of 2011 attracted millions of highly engaged viewers. In the internal memos of the television executives, it was repeatedly noted that the athlete's raw vulnerability was the primary driving force behind the massive ratings. But we must carefully consider the heavy cost of this extreme exposure. Why would a famously sensitive, deeply traumatized man allow his most private arguments and personal insecurities to be monetized on national television? The incredible paradox of his life was reaching an absolute boiling point. He was simultaneously a highly respected sports champion and a constantly heavily scrutinized tabloid commodity. This strange dual existence pushed his popularity to an absolute peak. And in April of 2011, the league executives handed him a prestigious trophy, entirely unaware that this gleaming piece of hardware marked the exact beginning of his devastating final descent. The ultimate validation of his unique, unselfish style of play finally arrived during a season where his off-court life was louder than ever. Lamar Odom had fully embraced his role as the ultimate spark plug off the bench, entering the game and instantly changing the entire tempo with his incredible versatility. The official recognition of his profound impact was absolutely undeniable. In the heavily guarded voting protocols released by the Basketball League, it is permanently recorded that on April 19, 2011, he was officially awarded the Sixth Man of the Year trophy. Looking closely at those published voting ballots, a striking number immediately jumps out. According to the official media tally, he secured exactly 96 first-place votes from a possible 119. And right here arises a fascinating question. How did a player completely submerged in the chaotic, heavily manufactured drama of reality television manage to earn the near-unanimous respect of the harshest sports critics in America? In the transcripts of that celebratory press conference, reporters noted that Lamar spoke with a deep, profound sense of gratitude, expressing absolute loyalty to his coaches and teammates. He genuinely believed that Los Angeles was his permanent home, a completely secure fortress where his complex legacy would be protected forever. He felt absolutely untouchable, completely insulated by his championship rings, his prestigious new trophy, and his massive celebrity status. But in the ruthless business of professional sports, absolute loyalty is a highly dangerous illusion. He was completely blinded by his own success, failing to see the massive corporate restructuring happening right behind his back. The comfortable world he had sacrificed so much to build was about to be violently shattered, and the ultimate betrayal would arrive in the form of a brief, completely devastating phone call from his own general manager in December of 2011. Lamar Odom genuinely believed his loyalty to the city of Los Angeles was absolute. But the dark side of fame in professional sports is that even the most beloved athletes are ultimately just high-priced, expendable assets. Behind the heavily guarded doors of the front office, executives were quietly maneuvering to completely dismantle the established championship core. In the official league statements released to the public on December 8, 2011, it is permanently documented that Commissioner David Stern controversially vetoed a massive, league-altering trade involving Lamar, vaguely citing basketball reasons. According to the internal memos immediately leaked to the hungry sports press, the Lakers had secretly agreed to ship their reigning Sixth Man of the Year to New Orleans to acquire star point guard Chris Paul. And right here, a glaring, unavoidable question emerges. How could a championship franchise secretly discard a deeply sensitive player who had just publicly dedicated his entire soul and physical health to their city? The shocking betrayal was absolutely devastating for Lamar Odom's fragile mental state. In the documented transcripts of a highly emotional radio interview broadcast later that exact same month, he explicitly confessed that he broke down and wept bitterly upon learning about the incredibly cold, secret negotiations. In the detailed reports compiled by local sports journalists, it was strictly noted that his trust in the basketball organization was completely broken beyond any hope of repair. The front office executives quickly realized the working relationship was entirely compromised, and they moved with ruthless, unforgiving speed. He was hastily packaged and officially traded away to the Dallas Mavericks just 3 days later, an incredibly abrupt transaction that ultimately served as a one-way ticket directly into a rapidly spiraling professional catastrophe. Arriving in the state of Texas to play for the Dallas Mavericks, Lamar Odom looked like a completely different person. The devastating emotional fallout from the Los Angeles betrayal had visibly drained all his signature energy and passion for the game. According to the official financial records publicly filed by the league office, his new contract with the Dallas organization guaranteed him a salary of exactly $8.9 million for that season. Looking directly at that massive financial figure, a critical investigative question must be asked. Why was a player earning almost $9 million suddenly refusing to fully engage with his new coaches and teammates? The answer lies in the profound psychological disconnect he was experiencing. He was physically wearing a Dallas uniform, but his mind was still completely stranded in California. In the detailed scouting reports from that turbulent season, analysts continuously noted his severe lack of conditioning, his absolute apathy on the defensive end of the floor, and his highly publicized, explosive verbal altercations with the famously demanding team owner, Mark Cuban. The situation rapidly deteriorated from a mere slump into a highly toxic standoff. In the official press releases issued by the Dallas Mavericks front office in April of 2012, it is formally documented that the player was completely deactivated and permanently separated from the team roster for the remainder of the season. In the journalist reports published that exact week, it was explicitly stated that the franchise simply preferred to pay him to stay away rather than risk further disruption in the locker room. Humiliated and completely broken by the disastrous Texas experiment, he desperately searched for a familiar sanctuary, leading to a surprisingly nostalgic contract negotiation in the summer of 2012. The disastrous, highly publicized collapse in Dallas left Lamar Odom with a severely damaged professional reputation. Desperate to recapture the fading magic of his early career, he convinced the Los Angeles Clippers, the very franchise that originally drafted him, to offer him one final, highly precarious opportunity. In the heavily guarded salary ledgers of the Clippers organization, it is permanently documented that in the summer of 2012, he agreed to a newly structured contract valued at approximately $8.2 million. By closely examining those specific financial terms, we must immediately ask a very uncomfortable question. Were the Clippers genuinely investing in his remaining athletic talent, or were they simply purchasing a recognizable Hollywood name to boost their local television ratings? When he finally stepped back onto the familiar Los Angeles hardwood, the painful reality was impossible to hide from the glaring arena lights. He had completely lost his explosive lateral speed, his remarkable leaping ability, and most importantly, his fundamental confidence. In the official statistical archives for the 2012 to 2013 season, the numbers reveal a deeply tragic story. He averaged exactly 4 points per game, marking the absolute, undisputed worst offensive output of his entire professional career. In the internal scouting reports leaked from opposing teams, analysts ruthlessly noted that he was no longer a legitimate threat, frequently describing him as a mere shadow of the incredibly dynamic forward he once was. He was permanently relegated to the end of the bench, a deeply humiliating demotion for a proud former champion. When the bitter season finally concluded in the summer of 2013, his contract completely expired, his phone went agonizingly silent, and in that terrifying professional void, his incredibly dark personal demons violently rushed back in. The devastating silence of an expired contract in the summer of 2013 created a terrifying vacuum in Lamar Odom's life. Without the incredibly strict, heavily monitored structure of professional basketball, his carefully hidden personal struggles rapidly spiraled entirely out of control. He began disappearing for days at a time, completely ignoring frantic phone calls from his family and close associates. The relentless tabloid press, which had previously documented his glamorous reality television lifestyle, quickly shifted their massive lenses to capture his rapid, highly public collapse. According to the official police reports filed by the California Highway Patrol, A highly alarming incident was formally documented on August 30th, 2013. In those public records, it was noted that Lamar Odom was arrested under suspicion of driving under the heavily intoxicating influence of illicit substances. And right here, we have to pause and ask the most painful question. How does a fiercely competitive, two-time champion allow himself to fall so deeply into the shadows without anyone successfully intervening? The absolute foundation of his carefully constructed personal life was fracturing right alongside his athletic career. The constant, incredibly public humiliation proved to be far too much for his high-profile marriage to survive. According to the heavily analyzed court materials submitted in Los Angeles County, the official documents initiating divorce proceedings were permanently stamped and filed on December 13, 2013. His sprawling television empire and his primary emotional support system had completely collapsed simultaneously. Desperately attempting to escape the suffocating presence of aggressive American reporters, he quietly packed his bags and boarded a long flight to Europe in the spring of 2014. But this overseas voyage would conclude catastrophically fast. Seeking a complete professional reset, far away from the blinding Hollywood spotlight, Lamar Odom crossed the Atlantic Ocean to attempt an incredibly unlikely athletic comeback. The Spanish basketball club Baskonia desperately needed a massive surge in local ticket sales, and bringing in a highly recognizable American superstar seemed like a highly lucrative, entirely foolproof business strategy. In the official press release distributed by the European organization on February 18, 2014, the team proudly announced a short-term contract spanning exactly 2 months. Looking closely at that specific announcement, one major suspicion immediately arises. Why would a proud former champion, a man who once commanded tens of millions, agree to such a brief, highly insecure trial period? The harsh truth was entirely visible the very moment he stepped onto the foreign hardwood. His physical conditioning was completely shattered, and the unique, mesmerizing agility that once dominated the American courts was entirely gone. The grueling, highly physical style of the Spanish league immediately overwhelmed his deeply fragile body. According to the translated medical reports officially released by the Spanish club physicians, a severe back injury forced the abrupt termination of his contract a mere 21 days after it was formally signed. The absolute illusion of a glorious European revival vanished almost instantly. His incredible championship-winning athletic journey had officially concluded on a quiet court in Spain. However, the absolute darkest, most terrifying chapter of his entire existence was still looming heavily on the horizon, waiting to reach its ultimate, devastating climax at a secluded entertainment complex in the state of Nevada in October of 2015. The descent from the absolute peak of the sports world ended in an incredibly isolated, highly controversial establishment located deep in the barren Nevada desert. In October of 2015, Lamar Odom checked himself into the Love Ranch, desperately seeking a complete escape from his overwhelming, deeply agonizing reality. He remained entirely secluded in his private suite for several consecutive days, consuming a highly dangerous, massive quantity of illicit stimulants. The tragic isolation of this incredibly wealthy, highly recognized celebrity paints a deeply haunting picture. According to the detailed financial disclosures later submitted into the official investigation files, a single staggering credit card receipt was registered for exactly $75,000, covering his brief stay at the Nevada complex. Why would a man who had seemingly lost everything continue to violently burn through his remaining finances in such a rapidly destructive manner? The answer arrived with terrifying finality when facility employees entered his room and discovered him completely unresponsive. In the harrowing, officially released audio recording of the emergency call placed to the local dispatchers on October 13, 2015, the deeply panicked manager explicitly reported that the famous guest was entirely unconscious and struggling to breathe. The emergency responders arrived rapidly, but they immediately faced a bizarre, deeply agonizing logistical hurdle. The standard medical helicopter dispatched to the scene simply could not accommodate his massive, towering athletic frame. Instead, the frantic paramedics were forced to securely strap him into a standard ambulance, racing desperately down the dusty highway toward a Las Vegas hospital while every single agonizing second ticked away. Upon arriving at the intensive care unit in Las Vegas, the situation was immediately classified as absolutely catastrophic. Lamar Odom was completely unresponsive, connected to a complex labyrinth of life support machines, while his terrified family and former teammates hastily boarded private jets to be by his side. The medical reality of his condition was almost entirely hopeless. According to the detailed statements provided by his attending physicians and widely published across major media networks, the patient had suffered exactly 12 massive strokes and 6 distinct cardiac events within a terribly short time frame. When we look at those absolutely staggering medical numbers, a chilling question immediately arises. How does a human heart endure 6 separate cardiac events and continue to beat? His body was completely shutting down, violently reacting to the immense toxicity it had absorbed. In the confidential hospital charts that were later referenced in legal documents, it was explicitly noted that Lamar was placed into a deeply induced, artificial coma for exactly 3 consecutive days to desperately protect his highly swollen brain. The entire sports world held its collective breath, anticipating a tragic, highly publicized announcement at any given moment. His closest friends were gently advised by the medical staff to prepare their final goodbyes, as the statistical probability of a meaningful recovery was practically zero. But just as the agonizing wait seemed destined to end in absolute sorrow, something entirely inexplicable happened inside that quiet, highly monitored hospital room. Against every single medical prediction, his eyes suddenly fluttered open, and the towering athlete looked around the completely silent ward, preparing to utter a single, highly shocking word that would completely stun the attending nurses. The absolutely miraculous awakening of Lamar Odom left the most experienced neurologists in the state of Nevada completely baffled. He had survived an event that statistically should have permanently ended his life. But the man who woke up from that terrifying 3-day coma was severely fractured. The grueling reality of his condition became immediately apparent when he was transferred back to California for intensive long-term care. According to the detailed medical reports filed by the premier Los Angeles Rehabilitation Center, during the first several weeks of his recovery, the former elite athlete was entirely unable to walk independently or even swallow standard food. And here we must ask the deeply painful investigative question: what happens to the mind of a legendary champion when he suddenly has to relearn the most basic mechanics of human movement? The physical devastation was absolutely immense, but the psychological and neurological damage was even more profound. In a highly emotional, deeply candid interview broadcast on national television years later, Lamar explicitly stated that his memory was so severely erased by the multiple strokes that he actually forgot the exact fact of his incredibly famous, highly publicized marriage. He had to slowly, agonizingly piece his entire existence back together, relying on old photographs and the patient explanations of his closest relatives. He spent countless hours pushing his broken body through grueling physical therapy sessions, fighting desperately just to regain a fraction of the incredible strength he once possessed. Through sheer, unrelenting willpower, he managed to rebuild his physical endurance and eventually walk out of the medical facility under his own power. He fully realized that he had been granted an impossible second chance, and by the spring of 2019, a heavily guarded manuscript containing his darkest secrets was officially sent to the printing presses. Lamar Odom had spent his entire adult life desperately trying to outrun the profound trauma of his youth and the intense pressures of his professional career. But surviving the Nevada incident completely changed his perspective. He finally understood that the only way to truly heal was to stop hiding behind his massive wealth and his championship rings. In May of 2019, his deeply revealing, highly anticipated autobiography, titled Darkness to Light, was officially released to the general public. According to the published financial figures from major literary tracking agencies, the raw, unfiltered book achieved incredibly high sales numbers, instantly launching it onto the national bestseller lists. Looking at the massive public reception of his written confessions, one profound question stands out. Did the audience buy the book to read about his basketball triumphs? Or were they desperately searching for an honest manual on how to survive absolute personal destruction? The athlete held absolutely nothing back, detailing every single agonizing failure, every broken relationship, and the terrifying depths of his profound dependencies. In a prominent television interview on a major national network that same year, he made a formal, legally binding public declaration, officially stating that he had successfully completed a rigorous rehabilitation program and was entirely free from illicit substances. He had finally confronted the dark shadows that had followed him all the way from the streets of Queens to the glittering heights of Los Angeles. Today, his massive basketball contracts are a thing of the past, and his championship trophies sit quietly in a display case. But the true legacy of Lamar Odom is not simply the story of a man who won 2 rings and married into a reality television empire. It is the profoundly inspiring, deeply complex narrative of a man who plummeted from the absolute pinnacle of American celebrity culture, survived an ordeal that defied all medical logic, and ultimately proved that no matter how far a person falls into the darkness, the human spirit still retains the miraculous power to find its way back into the light.